one of the things that can be so hard as a parent is telling your kids no. As parents, we love our kids. We want to do things that make them happy. Especially if we have the means, we want to be able to give them the things that they ask for. This has happened throughout history. We see cases where a generation of parents maybe grew up in poverty and then they managed to get a certain amount of wealth and then they gave their kids all the things that they didn't have. Or maybe a generation thought their parents were too strict or too distant, and so instead of continuing that forward, they switched it to being friends with their kids first and parents second. And these things are to a certain extent understandable because, again, we love our children. We want them to be happy. But there's a problem with this because as parents, our primary responsibility is to help our kids grow up to be well-adjusted, to be able to survive and thrive in a world that's not always going to give them everything they want, and to learn self-control and these sorts of things that will make them successful, that will keep them from hurting people, keep them from hurting themselves. We're all familiar with the stories of celebrities' children or the children of very wealthy parents who are kind of given everything that they want, and then they grow up to be crazy and off the rails and get into all sorts of trouble and make a wreck of their life. And this is not a new story. This is something that has happened throughout human history. In my Bible reading, I came across a passage in 1 Kings that really just jumped out at me as an example of this. King David had many sons, and towards the end of his life, there's the issue of who was going to succeed him as king. Now, his oldest two sons had both died. That's a whole nother story. And David also had many wives. Now, this is not God's design. Scripture's clear from the beginning, from creation in Genesis, that it was to be a man and a woman cleaving to each other. But in the ancient world, there was a tendency, especially among the elite, the kings, and that sort of thing, to take multiple wives. And though God didn't absolutely forbid this under the Old Covenant, nothing good ever comes of it. And this is certainly true of David's family. And so we have this situation where David's third son, as David is old and becoming infirm, decides that he is going to set himself up as king without the blessing of his father, without asking his father. And in fact, David had other plans and other designs and had promised the throne to Solomon. And so, but what's fascinating is we see that for as great as David was, and as great a king, and in many ways he's an example to us of faith and repentance and of seeking God and of worship, he's also an example a lot of times of what not to do. And he does not seem to have been a great father. So let's go ahead and read 1 Kings chapter 1, just verses 5 and 6. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. His father had never at any time displeased him by asking, Why have you done thus and so? He was also a very handsome man, and he was born next after Absalom. So here is this amazing insight in 1 Kings. And the Bible is very real about its heroes. That David's thirdborn, who it makes a certain sense would see himself as next in line for the throne, because his older two brothers had died, he decides to set himself up as king without asking his father, without getting his father's blessing. And we see this fascinating thing that his father had never at any time displeased him by asking, Why have you done thus and so? What an amazing statement of really parental failure on David's part. He had not discipled his son. He had not ever criticized his son's actions. He had not ever held him accountable for the things that he'd done. He just kind of let him be the prince. And you can imagine all the crazy things that a prince with no parental restraint could get up to. And so now he decides that he's going to set himself up as king, and he'd never been taught better. He obviously didn't respect his father enough to ask his father's permission, but it also seems that his father had never taught him to respect him. He had never engaged with him in this way. And this works out very poorly for Adonijah. It turns out that if you continue reading, you'll find out that Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, hears of this, and apparently David had promised her that Solomon would be king. And Nathan the prophet as well, he hears about this, and he and Bathsheba come together to alert David that Adonijah is about to set himself up as king, and to remind him of his promise. And so David then has Solomon anointed and proclaimed king, and he seats him on the throne. And so it's absolutely clear what the line of succession is. It's to go to Solomon. And in Adonijah's presumption, he gets himself into a very dangerous situation, because now he has just angered and crossed the actual heir. And in the ancient world, this definitely could get you killed, and likely would, even if you are brothers. And so he has to fall on Solomon's mercy. So he gathered this gathering to make himself king, and David had Solomon proclaimed king while this was going on, and they heard about it, and everybody realized that they were at the wrong table. So it says this: Then all the guests of Adonijah trembled and rose, and each went his own way. And Adonijah feared Solomon, so he arose and went and took hold of the horns of the altar. Then it was told Solomon, Behold, Adonijah fears King Solomon, for behold, he has laid hold of the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon swear to me first that he will not put his servant to death with the sword. So Adonijah finally learns a lesson. He finally is taught that there are consequences for your actions. And, if you aim for the throne, you better not miss. And so he takes a hold of the horns of the altar. You're not supposed to kill somebody when they're holding on to the horns of the altar. Now, there are exceptions to that. And Solomon hears of it. But now Adonijah is absolutely at the mercy of Solomon. And fortunately for him, Solomon proves merciful. And Solomon said, If he will show himself a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the earth. But if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. So King Solomon sent, and they brought him down from the altar. And he came and paid homage to King Solomon. And Solomon said to him, Go to your house. So Adonijah is spared. But no thanks to King David. David should have taught him better, but he didn't. Now, Adonijah had a responsibility to honor his father, and he didn't. But King David ultimately is the one who failed him. We see this responsibility in the New Testament. Ephesians chapter 6 repeats the command of children to honor their parents. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And the reality is that your parents have more wisdom than you do usually, almost all the time. I know that there are actually bad parents out there, but all in all, most of the time, parents have more wisdom than their children, and they love their children, and they want what's best for their children. Again, there are exceptions, but this is the general rule. And so, kids, if you honor your father and mother, even if they're not right all the time, even if they do things that upset you, the reality is that it will go better for you. You will learn some wisdom that you wouldn't otherwise have. But then there is the responsibility for the parents. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, it seems that David had taken the first part of this, not provoking your son to anger, and he had made that the whole rule. Don't do anything to upset Adonijah. Don't say anything to him. But when it talks about provoking your children to anger, it means treating them unjustly, treating them unfairly, in such a way that it makes them angry, right? Wronging them so that they become angry. Because, on the other hand, you are supposed to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And so that does mean correcting them. That does mean not giving them everything that they want. That does mean making them earn things, learning how the world works and how we are to live in it faithfully before God. And that's our responsibility as parents. And what that means is that as much as we love our children, and as much as we may enjoy our children's company, or sometimes not, but hopefully you do, but the primary responsibility is to bring up our children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Because if we really love them, that will be what is best for them. That will set them up for the best life. This is one of these things where you see, for instance, stuff like giving your kids chores to do and responsibilities around the house. Every study has shown that this is just a tremendously beneficial thing for your children for the long run in their life as adults. These sorts of things, not just giving them everything they want, making them earn some things, and not just giving them something because you might be more well off and have the money to do it. Giving them responsibility, making them work, being with them, caring about them, but also rebuking them and teaching them the right way to go, and not just overlooking the things that they really are doing wrong. If they're acting out in school, make sure it's actually happening, and then instead of being mad at the teacher, discipline your kids. Right? These sorts of things are really important. To be a good parent, you don't always have to think your kid is right. Sometimes to be on their side means correcting them and realizing it when they've done something wrong that somebody else is calling them out for, and not rescuing them from that. These are all really important things as parents, because otherwise we're gonna raise entitled children like Adonijah, who have never been told, why did you do that? And what they're going to do is get themselves into a really horrible situation. And then we haven't loved them. We haven't loved them as we're actually supposed to, in truth. So there's just some things to think about that are really important, I think, as parents, if we want to raise kids who have the best impact on the world and who have the best chance at a life of joy and fulfillment that is productive and meaningful, and that won't lead to tragedy and heartbreak. Well, I hope that you have found this helpful. It was just one of those passages that really jumped out at me when I read it, and it was a good reminder. If you do like this content, please do like it, comment, share it. All those things feed the algorithm, basically, and I would really like these teachings to get out there. I do hope that they're beneficial to people. If you are in the Yuma, Arizona area, I'm Philip. I'm the pastor of Valley Baptist Church. And if you don't have a home church of your own, I would love if you come and join us for worship. And if you're not a believer, or even if you are, but you want to come talk to me first, and maybe you have questions or to see what we're about, I'm happy to do that. I love answering questions, so you can reach out to me through Valley Baptist. Contact information is on all the social media platforms where this is going to be posted. But I do hope that the Lord fills you with wisdom, that He helps you to live in this world in a way that is wise and leads to joy for you and for your children, or for people you mentor, or your friends, nephews, nieces, whatever it may be for you, even if you don't have your own kids. God bless you all.